Welcome to our deep dive today. We're going to be looking into occultism.
Oh, very cool.
And I know you're particularly interested in Dion Fortune's ideas about, sort of this concept of sane occultism.
Yeah.
So we're going to be exploring some selections from her book today. And I think this will be a really interesting conversation. Occultism can seem kind of mysterious, a little intimidating maybe to some people. But that's what we're here for.
Yeah,
to break it down and kind of see what we can uncover.
It really does have that reputation of, kind of secret rituals and and symbols.
Yeah.
But I think Fortune is really wanting to offer something that's a little more grounded, a little more, as she says, sane.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it.
Yeah.
So where do we even start with sane occultism? What is that?
Well, the first thing I think that's really key is that Fortune makes a distinction between what she calls genuine occult science and what she calls pseudo-occultism.
Okay.
And she really emphasizes the importance of genuine occult science, arguing that it is based on real, verifiable experiences of higher consciousness.
Okay, so we're not talking about fortune-telling or, ghost hunting.
Exactly.
We're talking about something deeper, something more akin to a science, I guess you could say.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Think of it this way. You're looking at a mountain range from a distance.
Okay.
The mountains themselves, that solid, unyielding structure, that's the real deal. That's the true occultism. But all around the base of the mountains, you have this jumble of debris, like fallen rocks, eroded soil.
Okay, I see where you're going.
Maybe even a few tourist traps.
Right, yeah.
That's the pseudo-occultism that she's cautioning about.
I see, yeah.
It's all the sensationalized stories, the half-baked theories, the claims that crumble under scrutiny.
Yeah, that makes sense. So it's about being able to discern, what's real and what might be misleading.
That's it.
So if we're talking about genuine experiences, how do we even begin to prove that?
Right.
It's not like you can measure these things in a lab.
That's the challenge that Fortune addresses head-on in this book. She says it's kind of like trying to explain the beauty of classical music to someone who's never trained their ear to appreciate it. They might hear a lot of noise, but they wouldn't actually grasp the subtle harmonies, the interplay of instruments, the genius of the composer.
Right. So it's not that the experience isn't real. It's just that most people haven't developed the, I guess you could say, inner ear to perceive these things.
That's it.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
So then most people's opinions about occultism end up being based on what? Circumstantial
evidence at best.
Evidence.
Yeah.
Which can be very misleading, of course. Okay, so how do we develop that inner ear? How do we start to perceive these subtler realities? Now, I know Fortune talks about mystery schools. What are those exactly?
Well, think of mystery schools as these ancient institutions dedicated to training individuals in the principles and practices of occultism. Places where people could learn about the hidden forces at work in the universe, and especially in the realm of healing and disease.
Right. So it's like they were offering a glimpse behind the curtain almost.
Yes.
A way to kind of see the machinery that makes the world go round.
Yeah.
That makes me think of how she uses the analogy of the theater, of going behind the scenes to see how the stage illusions are created.
That's a great connection. She's really highlighting that it's important to be able to distinguish between the symbolic representations of the divine, the costumes, the props, the stage lighting, and then the ultimate reality behind them.
Right, and that's where this idea of the empty shrine comes in?
Yes. So imagine you walk into a temple expecting to see a statue of a deity, but the shrine is empty.
Okay.
That emptiness isn't a void.
Yeah.
It's an invitation to experience the divine directly, without the filter of images or symbols.
So it's not about worshiping idols or clinging to dogma. It's about developing our own capacity to experience the divine for ourselves.
That's a great way to put it.
Without these intermediaries. It's kind of like meditation, training the mind to quiet down so you can perceive what's beneath the surface.
Yes, and she also compares occult doctrines to algebra.
Okay.
It's a way of using symbols and equations to understand realities that are beyond our normal ways of thinking.
So it's about expanding our mental and spiritual capacity to grasp these deeper truths. But of course, with any powerful tool, there are risks involved.
Of course.
And Fortune warns against approaching occultism with the wrong motives.
Right. Absolutely. She says curiosity alone, or a desire for the marvelous.
Yeah.
Or even worse, a craving for power.
Right.
These can be really dangerous motivator.
Yeah, it's like setting off on a mountain expedition without the right gear.
Yeah.
Or a map.
Yeah.
You might get lost or injured or worse.
Yeah.
So how do we approach it in a way that avoids those pitfalls?
Well, she suggests we need to find a balance between skepticism and open-mindedness.
So we don't want to just blindly believe everything we hear.
Right.
But we also don't want to shut down to new possibilities.
Yes.
It's about being discerning, almost like a detective investigating a case.
That's a great way to think about it.
You don't jump to conclusions, but you're open to all the evidence.
Yeah.
And she even provides some specific methods for testing psychic experiences.
Yeah.
Particularly clairvoyant visions.
Yeah.
So how do we know if a vision is genuine or just our imagination?
Well, she stresses the importance of maintaining faith during an experiment. So you're not unconsciously influencing the psychic, but then applying a really rigorous analysis afterward.
It's like a scientist conducting an experiment. You need to control for variables.
Yes.
Eliminate bias.
Yes.
And then carefully examine the results.
Yeah.
It's interesting how she blends scientific thinking with this subjective nature of these psychic phenomena.
Yeah.
Now, I know she also talks about the subconscious mind as being this vast reservoir of information, but also a potential source of misleading material.
Absolutely.
So techniques like occult meditation can help us to access the subconscious, but we also need to scrutinize whatever comes out.
Yeah, you have to know how to distinguish between the insights that are coming from higher consciousness and then those that might stem from repressed desires or fears or memories.
Right. It's like panning for gold.
Yeah.
You got to know which pebbles to discard and which ones that actually hold value. I know Fortune also delves into the topic of past life records, which are notoriously tricky to access and interpret. How does she suggest we approach those?
Well, she describes a variety of methods, including free association and working with psychics who are skilled in accessing those records. But she's also very clear about the potential pitfalls.
Right.
It's easy to mistake subconscious material for a genuine past life experience.
Right. We have to be careful about jumping to conclusions.
Yes.
It's like piecing together a puzzle. You need to make sure the pieces fit before you declare that.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it.
You've solved it.
Yeah.
And then speaking of understanding ourselves and the universe, Fortune also touches on systems like astrology, numerology, and prophecy. How does she view those?
She views them as potentially valuable tools for understanding cosmic influences and cycles, but she cautions against their misuse.
Okay, so no consulting the stars to see if we're going to win the lottery.
Not quite. It's not about using them for personal gain or trying to predict specific events. It's about understanding the deeper meaning and symbolism behind these systems, not using them for fortune telling or manipulation.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Now, before we move on, I wanted to touch on something
that
Fortune seems particularly concerned about, and that's group karma.
Yes.
And the dangers of practicing occultism in groups.
This is really important. She emphasizes that choosing the right associates in occultism is just as crucial as having the right motives. A group can develop a kind of group mind that can exert a really powerful influence on its members.
Right, and she talks about a tainted sphere, this negative energy or karma that can accumulate within a group.
It's like the saying, birds of a feather flock together. If you surround yourself with people who are driven by ego, ambition, or a thirst for power, that energy is going to rub off on you.
So it's about being very discerning.
Yes.
About the groups we join and the people we allow into our inner circle.
Yes.
Okay, so that leads us to another topic that Fortune doesn't shy away from, and that's the dark side of occultism, what she calls black occultism.
Yeah.
This is where things get a little spooky. What kinds of practices is she warning against?
Well, she talks about a range of practices, including the use of drugs to induce altered states, hypnotic manipulation, and even sexual abuse within certain occult groups.
Those are some pretty heavy accusations. What stands out to you about her perspective on this?
What I find really interesting is that she goes beyond simply condemning these practices on a moral level. She also explains how they work, how they violate the principles of sane occultism, and how they ultimately harm everyone involved.
So it's not just about good versus evil.
Right.
It's also about understanding the energetic dynamics at play.
Yeah.
She gives this chilling example of how some groups might use sex magic.
Yes.
Not for spiritual growth or healing.
Yeah.
But to manipulate and control others.
Yes, exactly.
And she's especially critical of those who exploit vulnerable people, particularly women, by promising them spiritual advancement in exchange for sexual favors.
It's a blatant abuse of power.
Right. And she doesn't mince words when she calls these practices out for what they are.
Yeah.
Predatory and destructive.
Absolutely.
It's a stark reminder that not everyone who claims to be a spiritual teacher or an occultist is acting with integrity.
Exactly.
So how do we discern between a genuine teacher and someone who's just exploiting the language and symbols of occultism for their own selfish ends?
Well, remember those three things we talked about earlier. Right? Principles, genuine knowledge, common sense.
Good starting points. Fortune also emphasizes the importance of judging a teacher by their students.
So it's like the old saying, apple doesn't fall far from the tree.
Exactly.
If a teacher's students are balanced and healthy and ethically grounded, that's a good sign. But if they're constantly embroiled in drama, behaving unethically,
huge red flag,
or experiencing mental and emotional instability, that's a big red flag.
Yes, absolutely.
This deep dive is giving me so much to think about already. Where do we go from here?
Oh, there's so much more to unpack. Fortune goes into even more detail about the specific dangers of black occultism. And she offers some really practical advice for protecting ourselves and navigating this complex world safely.
Well, before we get ahead of ourselves, why don't we take a break here and pick up the conversation in part 2?
Okay, sounds good.
We'll delve deeper into those specific examples.
And explore some of the guidance she offers for staying safe and grounded.
Sounds great.
On our occult journey.
I'm looking forward to it, ready to kind of go a little bit deeper.
Yeah, let's do it.
Because, as we were saying, Fortune has some fascinating and sometimes unsettling things to say about the specific dangers of black occultism.
Okay, so what specific practices is she warning against?
Well, we touched on drugs as a way to alter consciousness. But she goes into a lot more detail about why this is a slippery slope. It's not just about the physical harm that drugs can cause. It's about the kinds of astral entities that they can attract.
Oh, wow.
Remember how we were talking about developing that inner ear to perceive subtle realities?
Right, like tuning into a different frequency.
Exactly. Well, drugs can be like cranking up the volume on that frequency without having any control over what you might pick up. You're essentially opening a door to the unseen without having any idea who or what might walk through.
That's a chilling thought. It's like wandering into a dark forest without a map or a compass.
Exactly. And the entities that you might encounter in that forest might not have your best interests at heart.
Right. Yeah.
Fortune is very clear that drugs don't confer knowledge or wisdom. They simply create a vulnerability that can be exploited.
So it's not about expanding consciousness, it's about losing control.
Exactly. Now, think about those who are naturally sensitive or who have been dabbling in occultism without proper guidance. They might already be more susceptible to these influences.
Right, that makes sense. Now, she also mentions the potential for psychic pathologies. What are some of the challenges?
Well, imagine being constantly bombarded by subtle energies and impressions.
Oh, wow.
It can lead to sensory overload, making it really difficult to distinguish between what's real and what's imagined.
That sounds exhausting.
It can be. Fortune also warns about psychic burnout, hypersensitivity, and the dangers of rapport with people who are depleted or negative.
So this isn't just about developing psychic abilities, it's about learning how to manage them.
Absolutely, Proper training, protection, and self-care are crucial for anyone with psychic abilities. It's like being an athlete. You need to train your mind and body, and you need to know your limits.
Yeah, that's a great analogy. Now, going back to black occultism and those who intentionally use occult knowledge for harmful purposes. Fortune goes into some pretty disturbing details about practices like hypnotic manipulation and sexual abuse within certain occult groups.
Yeah. What's important to remember here is that Fortune doesn't just condemn these practices on a moral level, although she clearly finds them reprehensible.
Right.
She also explains how they work, how they violate the principles of sane occultism, and how they ultimately harm everyone involved.
So again, it's not just about good versus evil. It's about understanding.
Right. It's about understanding the energetic dynamics at play.
The energetic dynamics at play.
For example, she describes how some groups might use sex magic, not for spiritual growth or healing, but to manipulate and control others.
Right.
It's a perversion of a powerful practice.
And she's particularly critical of those who exploit vulnerable people, especially women.
Yes.
By promising them spiritual advancement in exchange for sexual favors.
Absolutely. It's a blatant abuse of power.
Right. And she doesn't mince words when she calls these practices out.
No, she doesn't.
For what they are. Predatory and destructive.
Absolutely.
So it's a stark reminder that not everyone who claims to be an occultist or a spiritual teacher is acting with integrity.
Exactly, which is why discernment is so crucial.
Right.
We can't just take someone's word for it. We have to look at their actions, their motives, and the impact that they have on others.
Okay, so how do we discern between a genuine teacher and someone who's just exploiting the language and symbols of occultism for their own selfish ends?
Well, remember those three things we talked about earlier?
Yeah.
Right? Principles, genuine knowledge, common sense.
Yeah.
Those are good starting points. Fortune also emphasizes the importance of judging a teacher by their students.
Right. So if the teacher's students are balanced, healthy, ethically grounded.
Yes.
That's a good sign.
Yes.
But if they're all messed up and constantly embroiled in drama...
That's a huge red flag.
That's a big red flag.
Yeah, you can tell a lot about a teacher by the kind of people they attract and the kind of environment they create.
Right.
Are they fostering growth and understanding, or are they creating a breeding ground for ego and dysfunction?
She also warns against question assumptions and develop their own discernment.
So it's not about surrendering your will or your critical thinking abilities.
No, not at all.
It's about finding a teacher who empowers you to develop your own spiritual understanding.
And she's very specific about avoiding teachers who make unreasonable demands, like requiring oaths of obedience or large financial contributions.
Yeah. Those are often signs of someone who's more interested in power and control than genuine spiritual guidance.
Exactly.
Now, Fortune also has a lot to say about secrecy in occult societies.
Yes.
Why do you think this is such a common theme?
Well, on one level, it makes sense. You're dealing with powerful knowledge that could be easily misused or misunderstood.
Right. Yeah.
It's like giving someone the keys to a nuclear reactor without any training or safety precautions.
You don't just hand someone that kind of power without making sure they know what they're doing.
Exactly. Occult knowledge can be very dangerous.
In the wrong hands.
Right.
But Fortune goes beyond that. She argues that true occult secrets aren't about hidden formulas or rituals. They're about states of consciousness that can't be conveyed through words or symbols.
So it's like trying to explain the taste of chocolate to someone who's never had it.
Exactly.
You can describe it, but they won't truly understand it until they experience it.
Yes, and she suggests that genuine occult training is about guiding the student to those direct experiences, not just giving them a bunch of theoretical information.
It's about showing, not telling.
Exactly.
But if these secrets are so profound and transformative, why all the secrecy around them?
Well, remember what we talked about earlier about psychic pathologies?
Right.
Some of those states of consciousness can be incredibly destabilizing, especially for those who aren't prepared.
So it's about protecting both the individual and the knowledge itself from misuse or harm.
Yeah. It's about making sure the student is ready.
Right. Before they're given the keys to the kingdom, so to speak.
It sounds like there's a spiritual vetting process involved.
That's right. Yeah. Fortune suggests that genuine teachers will be able to discern whether a student is ready for certain teachings and experiences. It's not about being elitist. It's about making sure the knowledge is passed on responsibly.
It's interesting how Fortune also emphasizes the importance of following your own racial tradition when it comes to occult training.
Yeah, this might seem counterintuitive in our globalized world, but she makes a compelling argument about how different races have different psychic constitutions and karmic predispositions.
So she's not saying that one tradition is better than another.
Right.
It's more about finding a path that resonates with your own soul and ancestry.
Exactly. She points out that certain Eastern methods, for example, might be too intense or destabilizing for Western bodies and minds. She uses the analogy of trying to train a racehorse, using the same methods you'd use for a draft horse.
Exactly.
They're both powerful animals, but they have different temperaments, strengths, and weaknesses.
Yes.
So finding a path that aligns with your own constitution is crucial for avoiding harm and maximizing your potential for growth.
Yeah, it's about honoring your own unique spiritual DNA.
I like that spiritual DNA. Yeah. It's about recognizing that there's no one-size-fits-all approach to this.
Absolutely.
Now, all this talk about different traditions and teachings brings up a question for me.
Yeah.
How do we even assess the validity
Right.
and authenticity of these different occult practices?
That's a great question, especially since there's so much information out there and not all of it is reliable.
Right. It's like navigating a jungle. You need to know which plants are safe to eat and which ones are poisonous.
Exactly. And this is where Fortune's emphasis on discernment becomes even more crucial. She offers a few key guidelines. For example, look at the fruits of a particular teaching or practice.
So does it lead to greater peace, wisdom, compassion, ethical behavior?
Exactly. Or does it lead to confusion, drama, exploitation, moral decay?
Okay, those are pretty clear indicators.
Yeah.
She also warns against teachers who are fixated on phenomena or make these grandiose claims without any real substance behind them.
Yeah, she's saying that true occultism is about developing wisdom and spiritual understanding.
Okay.
Not just chasing after psychic powers or supernatural experiences.
It's about going deeper, not just getting flashy.
Exactly.
And she cautions against getting caught up in the glamour and mystery of occultism.
Yes.
Because that can blind us to potential red flags.
Absolutely, yeah. She encourages us to use our common sense, our critical thinking skills, and our intuition to assess the credibility of any teacher or teaching. Don't just check your brain at the door.
So it's about finding that balance between open-mindedness and healthy skepticism.
Absolutely.
We need to be both receptive and discerning.
Yes, we can't just shut down our critical faculties or blindly believe everything we hear.
Right.
But we also don't want to dismiss everything out of hand.
Right.
It's about staying curious while also staying grounded.
Okay, that makes sense. Now, it sounds like Fortune believes that there's a kind of spiritual guidance available to those who are sincerely seeking truth.
Yeah, she has this beautiful line about how the way opens up for us from the inner planes as we make within ourselves the conditions that entitle us to our advancement. It's like saying that the universe will meet us halfway if we're putting in the effort to grow and evolve.
So it's not just about finding the right teacher.
Right.
It's also about cultivating our own inner wisdom and receptivity.
Absolutely. And that brings us to the ultimate goal of sane occultism.
Okay.
Remember, it's not about personal power or ego gratification.
Right. She makes that very clear.
So what is it about?
Yeah. What is it about?
It's about using our knowledge and abilities to serve God and humanity.
So it's about making a positive difference in the world.
Yes. And she emphasizes that this service doesn't have to be flashy or dramatic. It can be as simple as living an ethical life, radiating compassion, and contributing to the betterment of society in whatever way we can.
That's a really empowering message. It takes occultism out of the realm of the esoteric and brings it into our everyday lives.
Exactly. She's reminding us that occultism, when practiced sanely and ethically, can be a powerful tool for personal and collective transformation.
This has been an incredibly insightful deep dive so far.
I agree.
We've covered a lot of ground, but there are still a few more key insights, I think, to explore.
Definitely.
Well, why don't we, before we wrap things up, why don't we try to distill some of the key takeaways from our conversation?
Okay.
And leave our listener with something to ponder.
Sounds like a plan.
Okay, so we've spent this deep dive exploring Dion Fortune's Sane Occultism.
We have.
And we've really uncovered a lot of fascinating and sometimes unsettling insights.
Yeah, for sure.
So what would you say are some of the most important takeaways from our exploration today?
Well, I think one of the things that strikes me most is that Fortune constantly reminds us that occultism, when it's approached with the right mindset, can be this really powerful tool for growth and transformation.
Yeah.
But it's not a path for the faint of heart.
Right.
It requires discernment, discipline, and a deep commitment to ethical principles.
It's so easy to get caught up in the mystery and allure of occultism and think that we found a shortcut to spiritual enlightenment.
Exactly.
But as Fortune points out, there are no shortcuts.
No.
Only pitfalls disguised as easy answers.
And those pitfalls can be pretty dangerous, as we've discussed.
Right, yeah.
Whether it's getting lured in by the false promises of Black occultism, or simply falling prey to our own ego and ambition, the risks are very real.
That's why she emphasizes the need for a balanced approach.
Yes.
This blending of open-mindedness with healthy skepticism.
Yeah.
Embracing intuition while also honing our critical thinking skills.
It's about finding that middle path, that sweet spot between blind faith and cynical dismissal.
Yeah.
It's recognizing that there are forces at work in the universe that we may not fully understand.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean we should abandon common sense or our ethical compass.
And it's also about recognizing that occultism is not just about acquiring knowledge or developing psychic powers.
Exactly.
It's about how we use that knowledge and those powers. It's about aligning ourselves with the highest good and contributing to the betterment of humanity.
Exactly. Fortune is calling for an occultism that is not only sane, but also ethical, compassionate, and ultimately in service to something larger than ourselves.
So after all of this deep dive into sane occultism, what would be the one question that you would leave our listener with?
Ooh, that's a good one.
Something to kind of spark their continued exploration of these ideas.
Yeah, I think I would ask, what aspect of sane occultism calls to your soul? What really resonates with you from Fortune's writings, and how can you bring those principles into your everyday life?
Yeah.
Not just in your spiritual practices, but in your interactions with others and in your contributions to the world.
That's a great question.
Thank you.
It really encapsulates the essence of her message.
Yeah.
It's not just about reading books or attending workshops. It's about embodying these principles and making them a living reality.
It's a journey that requires constant reflection, discernment, and a willingness to course correct when necessary.
Yeah, but a journey worth taking.
Oh, absolutely.
Because it leads us to a deeper understanding of ourselves, but also to a more meaningful and fulfilling engagement with the world.
Beautifully said.
Well, I think that about wraps it up for our deep dive. I hope this has been a thought-provoking and enlightening exploration for you, our listener.
Absolutely.
Until next time.
Take care.